Breaking developments tonight out of Washington suggest the Trump White House is entering one of the most unstable moments of its second term. According to multiple senior sources, a deep fracture has opened inside the administration itself, not between parties, but within the president's own governing structure. What began as a legal setback has now escalated into open institutional resistance. Earlier today, the Supreme Court issued an emergency order temporarily blocking the enforcement of a controversial executive directive tied to immigration and domestic enforcement. The ruling cited serious constitutional concerns, particularly around due process and federal overreach. That decision triggered something extraordinary. Within hours, senior cabinet officials convened an unscheduled late night meeting inside the White House. The discussion, described by those familiar with it as heated and confrontational, centered on whether the administration should continue enforcing the president's order despite the court's intervention. The answer, for the first time in this presidency, was no. In a move almost without precedent, multiple cabinet members refused to comply, not quietly, not privately, but collectively. A joint statement leaked simultaneously to several major news organizations made clear that these officials would not carry out directives they believed violated constitutional limits or exposed them to legal liability. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty to the law now outweighs loyalty to the president. That moment marks a fundamental shift. Cabinets rarely rebel. When they do, it signals that confidence in presidential judgment has eroded beyond repair. This isn't internal disagreement. It's a breakdown of command authority. The fallout was immediate. Several high-profile figures who once defended Trump at all costs have gone silent. No press briefings, no social media defenses, no coordinated messaging. Even Republican leadership on Capitol Hill has offered only carefully worded statements emphasizing respect for the Constitution, notably without mentioning the president by name. Behind the scenes, panic has set in. Staffers are reportedly seeking legal counsel. Agencies are slowing implementation of new directives. Career officials are documenting communications in anticipation of future investigations. The machinery of government has shifted from execution to self-preservation. This is no longer about policy. It's about survival. Sources describe the atmosphere inside the White House as volatile. Accounts from the meeting depict raised voices, ultimatums, and warnings from legal advisors that continuing down this path could expose officials and potentially the president to criminal or civil consequences. One senior official reportedly told the president flatly, "This crosses a line we cannot follow." That statement alone would have been unthinkable months ago. Now the implications are cascading outward. In Congress, Republican lawmakers are quietly distancing themselves. Joint appearances have been canceled, fundraising events postponed. Committee chairs are signaling a willingness to pursue oversight that had previously been off limits. This is how political isolation begins, not with a dramatic announcement, but with silence, hesitation, and calculated absence. Legal mechanisms are now in motion. Subpoenas are expected. Contempt proceedings are being discussed. If defiance of court orders continues, enforcement actions could escalate rapidly. Even conversations once considered taboo, including renewed impeachment inquiries or 25th Amendment considerations, are reportedly resurfacing in private. International observers are taking notice. Allied governments are expressing concern through diplomatic channels. Markets have reacted with volatility, reflecting fears of prolonged instability. Security partners are watching closely for signs that American leadership is entering a period of paralysis. The broader question is no longer whether this administration can push its agenda, it's whether the system itself can contain the damage. This moment represents a stress test of American governance. Courts have intervened. The cabinet has drawn a line. Congress is repositioning. Institutions are asserting themselves, not in unison, but with increasing urgency. And the president, sources indicate he is preparing a public response, likely framing the rebellion as betrayal by deep state actors. Firings may be announced, counter orders issued, legal appeals rushed to friendly courts. But the tools that once worked are losing effectiveness. A president cannot govern alone. And tonight, it is increasingly clear that the coalition that sustained Trump's authority is fracturing. What happens next will define the trajectory of this administration and possibly the stability of the system itself. This is no longer a political dispute. It is a constitutional confrontation. And once that line is crossed, there is no easy return to normal. Senate showdown. Trump confronted as power shifts in Washington stop what you're doing, because this is one of those moments that quietly changes history. Early this morning, far from cameras and microphones, something extraordinary unfolded inside the United States Capitol. No rallies, no speeches, no social media theatrics, just a closed room, locked doors, and a confrontation that senior lawmakers are already calling irreversible. Donald Trump was summoned, and this time the Senate did not blink. A closed-door confrontation nobody expected. According to multiple senior sources, Republican and Democratic Senate leadership jointly demanded a private emergency meeting with the former president following a Supreme Court decision issued just hours earlier. That ruling denied Trump's latest attempt to halt ongoing election interference proceedings, a denial that effectively removed his final procedural shield. This was not symbolic. This was not routine. This was intervention. Inside a secured Senate conference room, leaders from both parties confronted Trump directly. No press pool, no staff allowed, phones confiscated, notes forbidden, and the message was blunt. The delay is over. The fight ends here. Why this moment is different? Washington has seen confrontations before. What makes this one historic is who was in the room and why they were united. Veteran Republican leadership figures, normally cautious to a fault, stood alongside Democratic leadership in rare alignment, not to negotiate policy, not to trade concessions, but to warn. Sources describe the tone as controlled but unmistakably final. Trump was told that continued efforts to undermine court rulings, pressure election officials, or mobilize obstruction would no longer be tolerated by Congress, by the courts, or by institutions that had previously stayed silent. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about containment. What triggered the Senate's move? The catalyst was the Supreme Court's morning ruling rejecting Trump's immunity-based appeal tied to post-election conduct. In clear language, the court stated that former presidents are not exempt from criminal accountability for actions taken outside lawful authority. Legal analysts immediately recognized what that meant. No more procedural stalling, no more jurisdictional fog, no more wait and see. Within hours, Senate leadership moved. Inside the room, a collision of reality. According to multiple accounts, Trump entered the meeting confident, defiant, and prepared to argue, as he has so many times before, that pressure, public loyalty, and delay would carry him through. It didn't. One senior lawmaker reportedly told him, "This ends either with compliance or with consequences." Another cited the long-term damage to the electoral system, warning that continued defiance would isolate him completely, politically, legally, and institutionally. Trump pushed back hard, but something had changed. There was no reassurance, no defense, no promises of cover. When the meeting ended, Trump left without shaking hands. The silence that followed spoke louder than words. Normally, after a confrontation like this, allies flood the airwaves. That didn't happen. No coordinated defense from Senate Republicans, no rallying statements, no urgent appearances. Instead, there was silence, followed by cautious, carefully worded statements emphasizing respect for the Constitution and the rule of law. In Washington, silence is never accidental. The political meaning. Isolation has begun this moment, marks a turning point not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Trump was not defended. He was not reassured. He was not protected. Behind the scenes, insiders describe a rapid recalculation taking place across Capitol Hill. Lawmakers who once viewed loyalty as survival are now weighing risk, and the risk has changed. The legal system is moving forward, the courts are no longer pausing, and Congress is no longer standing still. What happens next? The mechanism engages. This confrontation didn't create consequences, it unlocked them. Within hours, prosecutors accelerated filings previously held in reserve. Judges cleared schedules for expedited hearings. Congressional committees quietly prepared subpoenas. Legal teams shifted from delay strategy to damage control. This is how institutional power moves, not loudly, but relentlessly. Every step now triggers the next, automatically. Why Trump's usual playbook may fail this time? Trump's greatest strength has always been momentum. Rally crowds, flood the media, overwhelm opponents. But momentum requires allies. And right now, allies are disappearing. Donors are hesitating. Surrogates are hedging. Former defenders are suddenly unavailable. One longtime Republican strategist summarized it privately. He's not radioactive, but he's no longer untouchable. That distinction matters. The global reaction is already underway. This isn't just domestic drama. Foreign governments are watching closely. Allies want stability, markets want predictability, institutions want reassurance that the system still functions. The Senate's intervention sent a signal abroad, the guardrails still exist, but that signal only holds if enforcement follows. 3. Possible endgames at this point, the trajectory narrows to 3 outcomes. Compliance Trump steps back, limits public escalation, and allows legal proceedings to run, preserving political viability for allies and minimizing systemic damage. Confrontation Trump doubles down, attacks institutions, and forces accelerated legal enforcement, risking severe restrictions on future eligibility and freedom of movement. Fragmentation. His coalition fractures completely, leaving him politically isolated while the legal system proceeds independently. What disappears now is the fourth option: endless delay. Why this was the point of no return. The Senate doesn't stage interventions lightly. They do it when delay becomes dangerous. Today's meeting wasn't about punishment. It was about preservation. Preservation of elections, preservation of legitimacy, preservation of a system strained to its limits. Whether Trump accepts that reality or challenges it will define what happens next. Final thought. This didn't look dramatic on camera, but history rarely does in real time. Sometimes history happens in a locked room with no applause, no witnesses, and no way back. And today, one of those rooms closed. Senate draws the line the moment power slipped from Trump's hands. Stop everything, because something just happened in Washington that may mark the point of no return. Behind closed doors, away from cameras and microphones, the United States Senate did something it almost never does. It confronted Donald Trump directly, not through press releases, not through court filings, not through Sunday talk shows, but face to face. This was not political theater. This was not partisan noise. This was an intervention, and it happened because the system believes the risk has crossed a threshold. The moment that triggered everything early this morning, the Supreme Court issued a ruling that quietly but decisively changed the balance of power. Trump's latest attempt to delay accountability, an emergency appeal tied to election interference charges, was denied. Not delayed, not partially granted, denied. The language was short, cold, unforgiving. No individual, regardless of former office, is immune from criminal process. That sentence landed like a seismic charge beneath Washington because it meant something very specific. The legal clock is no longer paused. Within hours, Senate leadership convened an emergency closed-door session. No staff, No phones, no leaks, at least not at first. What followed was not debate, it was a warning. Inside the confrontation, according to multiple independent sources, Trump was summoned, not invited, to a secure conference room in the Senate complex. Waiting for him were figures who almost never share a unified front: Republican institutional leadership, Democratic Senate leadership, senior legal advisors tied directly to congressional oversight. This was bipartisan, deliberately so. The message was simple and brutal. The delay strategy is over. Mitch McConnell reportedly spoke first: calm, direct, final. You've exhausted the system. We're not carrying this any further. Chuck Schumer followed, not with theatrics, but with legal clarity. The courts have spoken. Continued defiance now damages the institution itself. Trump responded as expected: anger, accusations, talk of betrayal, claims of conspiracy. But something had changed. The room didn't move with him anymore. No allies jumped in, no defenses were offered, no escape routes were suggested. For the first time in years, Trump was arguing, and no one was arguing back. Why this was unprecedented: Senate leadership does not confront presidents like this, not sitting presidents, not former presidents, not unless the system believes the threat is existential. This wasn't about politics anymore, it was about containment. The Senate's calculation was clear. If Trump continues to escalate, legally, rhetorically, or through public pressure, the damage won't stay contained to him. It spreads to the judiciary, federal law enforcement, electoral legitimacy, international credibility. At that point, delay becomes complicity. What changed behind the scenes? For months, Trump relied on three pillars of protection: legal delay, endless appeals, jurisdictional challenges, party loyalty, silence or soft defenses from GOP leadership, public exhaustion, betting the public would tune out. All three collapsed at once. The Supreme Court removed delay, the Senate removed cover, and public patience has evaporated. That convergence is rare, and when it happens, institutions move fast. The fallout begins immediately, within hours of the confrontation. DOJ prosecutors reassigned senior teams to Trump-related cases. Federal courts expedited scheduling on stalled proceedings. Congressional committees quietly reopened dormant investigative files. Donors paused contributions. Campaign staff began consulting attorneys. This isn't speculation. This is how enforcement looks before it becomes visible: quiet, procedural, relentless. The party fracture is now public. The most telling development isn't what was said in that room. It's who hasn't said anything since. No immediate defense from GOP leadership, no coordinated talking points, no mass media pushback. Instead, we respect the rule of law. The courts must be allowed to function. No one is above the Constitution. Those phrases are distancing language. They are how politicians step away without triggering backlash. Translation: they see the direction this is heading. Trump's shrinking options. Trump now has three paths, and none are good. Option 1: total defiance, escalate rhetoric, attack courts, mobilize outrage. This risks contempt charges, gag orders, and accelerated enforcement. Option 2: legal compliance, appear, testify, engage the process. This exposes him to evidence he has spent years trying to bury. Option 3: political withdrawal, reduce visibility, slow the campaign, reframe the narrative. This preserves some legacy, but signals defeat. None restore control. Why this feels different: Trump has survived scandals before. He has outlasted investigations. He has weaponized chaos. But this moment is different for one reason: institutions are acting in coordination. Courts, Congress, career officials, international allies. Not loudly, not emotionally, but deliberately. That's what happens when systems decide persuasion has failed. Global repercussions are already underway. Foreign governments are watching closely. European diplomats privately describe the moment as stabilizing but dangerous. Markets are reacting to uncertainty, not panic, but caution. Security agencies are quietly reviewing contingency protocols tied to political unrest. When internal accountability accelerates, global confidence holds its breath. What comes next? Expect the following in the coming days: court dates set rapidly, subpoenas enforced without delay, financial scrutiny intensified, campaign messaging narrowed, loyalists thinning out, not chaos, compression. The walls don't fall all at once, they close in, the real meaning of this moment. This isn't about Donald Trump alone. It's about whether the system still works when tested repeatedly. For years, critics argued institutions were too weak, too slow, too afraid. Today suggests something else. They were patient, and patience has limits. Final thought power doesn't disappear in explosions. It fades when institutions stop responding to you. And today, in a locked room with no cameras, that happened. The confrontation wasn't the end. It was the beginning of enforcement. And once that begins, it does not stop because someone refuses to accept it. This moment represents a stress test of American governance. Courts have intervened. The cabinet has drawn a line. Congress is repositioning. Institutions are asserting themselves, not in unison, but with increasing urgency. And the president? Sources indicate he is preparing a public response, likely framing the rebellion as betrayal by deep state actors. Firings may be announced, counter orders issued, legal appeals rush to friendly courts, but the tools that once worked are losing effectiveness. A president cannot govern alone. And tonight, it is increasingly clear that the coalition that sustained Trump's authority is fracturing. What happens next will define the trajectory of this administration and possibly the stability of the system itself. This is no longer a political dispute. It is a constitutional confrontation. And once that line is crossed, there is no easy return to normal.